Welcome, everyone, to Southminster Steinhauer United Church. Whether we're making ourselves part of the circle in this room, whether we're joining us online through the week, be it in Toronto, in Saskatoon, anywhere in the world that tunes in to us, welcome. You're an important part of our circle this morning. This is a place of spiritual exploration. And so we are all welcome into a community this morning of diversity. And we're welcome into this circle where we're invited to open ourselves to compassion, to kindness, to depth of knowing, and most importantly, a place where we know we're all valued, regardless of our age, our stage, our sexual orientation, our gender identity, our place in the universe. We are all welcome here to be community for a time, to reflect on what's important in life, and to be invigorated, to be excited to live our values, to make a difference in the world because of who we are, how we speak, what we do. So no matter who we are this morning, where we've come from, how our week has been, we're welcome here. We create a safer place here to honestly explore, to be ourselves, and we honestly say welcome to this place.
This morning we honor the land on which we walk and the commitments we are a part of in sharing that land. Former moderator of the United Church and member of the Fisher River Cree Nation, Stan McKay, wrote, "Canadian society is certainly a party to the treaty. We are all treaty people. We are committed to sharing life on this land, and all Canadians are participants in the benefits and responsibilities of maintaining the treaty." He says, treaty language promises that the agreements are for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. And the sun is sure shining here in Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Cree, Métis, Deneta, Blackfoot, Nakota Sioux, and other Indigenous peoples. May our actions reflect our identity as treaty people. And now, to spark our time of being here together in circle, we light our candle. Every week we do this. It is a trusted ritual, a certainty. And we definitely seek light in times of uncertainty. But there is also light within uncertainty. Uncertainty is not all about stumbling in the dark. There is light in the possibility, the learning, the unknown of uncertainty. Light like this.
Each time we gather, we seek to strengthen our intentions in the ways that we hope to live more faithfully to the values that we hold dear and that ground our lives. To strengthen our intentions is to pray, and so we offer these words with one another as a way of speaking our commitment to life and to the way we are choosing to live. In caring for one another, may we be untiring. In hearing one another, may we be respectful. In sheltering one another, may we be strong. In holding one another, may we be tender. In forgiving one another, may we be generous. In the expectations we have of one another, may we be realistic. In the stories we share with one another, may we find wisdom. In seeking meaning with one another, may we be curious. And in loving one another, may we be unfailing as we seek to live more nearly as we pray. May it be so.
It is time for a time for all ages.
Touchdown.
Yeah.
Why is everyone second or third? Always the first one here.
Anyone who wants to come to the carpet is welcome. It's the best seat in the house. You know it. We have a story to share today. It's by Dr. Seuss. It's a story about possibilities, and you can already be thinking of how it might end. I wonder how it will end.
Oh, it's in a book called Sneetches and Other Stories. This is one of the other stories.
Yes, I've read everything.
You've read them all. Good. This is called The Zacks. It's short.
All right. One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zax and a south-going Zax. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face.
Look here now.
The north-going Zax said,
I say, you're blocking my path. You're right in my way. I'm a north-going Zax, and I always go north. Get out of my way now, and let me go forth. Who's in whose way?
Snap the south-going Zax.
I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way. And I ask you to move and let me go south in my south-going groove.
Then the north-going Zax puffed his chest up with pride.
I never
He said,
take a step to one side. And I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. And I'll prove to you, yelled the
yelled
south.
the south-going Zax.
This is hard. I'll prove to you that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years. For I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in South-going school. Never budge. That's my rule. Never budge in the least. Not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here not budging. I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still.
Well, of course the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highways came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zax and left them there, standing unbudged in their tracks.
They just never budged, did they? One was going north, one was going south. They were not going to move. So, do you think that you would have any ideas about what could happen in this story? We don't have to wait 59 years, but maybe even after 59 years, something could happen. What could happen to solve this problem?
And then the other Zack jumps over.
So that was a great idea. Leapfrog, so they can still go north and south. They could go over and under.
Yeah,
Very nice.
that's a good idea.
And another person said, just go around.
It's okay. It's okay to not be like the Zax. It's okay to think, you know what? This was working, but now I see that maybe it's not. And maybe we need a new idea. Maybe something new could be a possibility for us. So, we're talking about the Zax, and we're hoping that we can be a little more flexible. Flexible.
58 years.
50, yeah, maybe not 59. Let's have a new idea thrown in there somewhere along the way. So, hey, life is all about new ideas and thinking about what's possible. What might be possible? Right, change might be possible. It could be possible to do something different.
From the collection of poetry entitled Poetry of Presence, an anthology of mindfulness poems, comes this poem entitled The Place Where We Are Right. These are the words of Yehuda Amichai. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. Where our doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow. May we find wisdom for our way.
In the midst of pain, I choose love. In the midst of pain, I choose love. In the midst of pain, sorrow falling down like rain, I awake the sun again. I choose love. I choose love. In the midst of war, I choose peace. In the midst of war, I choose peace. In the midst of war, hate and anger keeping score, I will seek the good once more. I choose peace. I choose peace. When my world falls down, I will rise. When my world falls down, I will rise. When my world falls down, explanations can't be found. I will climb to holy ground. I will rise. I will in the midst of pain, I choose love. In the midst of pain, I choose love. In the midst of pain, sorrow falling down like rain, I await the sun again. I choose love. I choose love.
Among the stories handed down in our spiritual tradition, in the legacy of the early Jewish Christian movement, are a collection of stories that are recorded in the book of Acts that are stories in that transition time when there was a community within Judaism that was passionate about the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth and beginning to found communities on the ethic of that teaching. Among those stories is this one, the story of one of the leaders of that movement, perhaps the leader we know best, whose name once was Saul and we know as Paul. This is a story of a day set in the city of Athens when Paul seeks to share something about his understanding of the new path that he has begun to walk with the community of those who follow Jesus of Nazareth. As Paul waited in Athens for his companions Silas and Timothy, he became angrier and angrier. All those idols. The city was a junkyard of idols. So Paul took his stand in the open space of the Agapolis in Athens and laid it out for them. It is plain to see that you Athenians take your religion very seriously. When I arrived here the other day, I was fascinated with all the shrines I came across. And then I found one inscribed, "To the God nobody knows." I'm here to introduce you to that God so that you can worship intelligently and know who you're dealing with. That God is the God who made the world and everything in it. This God of sky and land doesn't live in custom-made shrines. God made the creatures. The creatures didn't make God. Starting from scratch, God made the entire human race and made the earth hospitable with plenty of time and space for living so that we could seek after God and not grope in the dark, but actually find God. In God, we live and move and have our being. I've been reading from the paraphrase of Acts found in The Message by Eugene Peterson in this story about a leader in the early Jewish Christian movement. Have you ever had one of those days that you wish you could rewind, erase, redo? An email that you wish you could retrieve from cyberspace and replace it? A conversation you wish you could start over and finish differently? An opinion you voiced you'd like to revise? In the world of the story, I wonder if that day in Athens was that kind of experience for Paul. I wonder if there didn't come a time when he wished that he could stand in the Acropolis and approach the idea of an unknown God in another way. I wonder if he ever looked back on that day, as I've looked back on many sermons, with embarrassment. Not to worry. Thanks, Gilda. That's the voice of wisdom. I wonder if he ever thought, what possessed me to do all the talking? Why didn't I ask any questions? Why didn't I invite a conversation, engage a dialogue? Who was I to tell the people of Athens anything about the God that they honored as unknown? And why did he need to disparage this monument as an idol when he had the opportunity to learn what it meant as an icon? And why had he insisted in translating his experiences into a bundle of beliefs, securing them with a string, and dropping his package on his listeners as though he had some monopoly on truth? And why was he so afraid of acknowledging something as unknown? Why couldn't he ask about their search for the sacred and then share the story of his search? Because if he had shared the story of his search, we would imagine that he would have begun by confessing to them that he had been a pious and orthodox Jew, eager to learn everything he could from the best and brightest scholars of his tradition, and that for most of his life, he had been utterly and totally immersed in first century Judaism, seeing history and meaning entirely through the lenses of the narrative that he had been born into. A narrative that had taught him that he was part of a people who had been called into being by the one true God, and that they had been chosen by this God and called out from the peoples of all the nations of the world to be the people of this one true God, and that they were to be faithful to this one true God by obeying all of the laws that had been given through their teachers and prophets, and that the one true God had given them a land and a distinct identity which they'd lost again and again to their enemies as supposedly punishment for their unfaithfulness. But there would come a day when there would be deliverance from their enemies and restoration to their land, and that was the day. That was the Messiah. That was the one they waited and prayed for. And every now and again, there would be among them those who would claim that they'd already found that one for whom they had prayed. And that is what made the friends of Jesus of Nazareth heretics in the eyes of guys like Paul. He would have told the Athenians that he was so persuaded of all this that he would go and did go to any length to protect this truth from any and all challenges. And indeed, in his fundamentalist zeal, he had participated in murderous missions to eradicate this heresy. He'd been on his way from Jerusalem to Damascus to silence the claims of the Jesus cult by executing one of its leaders when he had an experience that changed his life. And he could never begin to wrap reason around what happened on that road and changed his heart and changed his mind. That somehow a peculiar light had penetrated his piety and he was never the same again. That something pierced his certainty and shattered his clarity. Hadn't he learned anything from those 3 days he spent in the dark? Hadn't he learned the dangers of seeing one's organizing narrative as sure and certain truth? Hadn't he learned that the best of our explanations are always subject to revision? Hadn't he seen the danger of substituting one set of certainties for another, exchanging one set of certainties for yet another? If he had been able to speak from the place the poet spoke from, that place where doubts and loves dig up our world, he could never have stood on a soapbox in the center of town and presumed to tell the locals what their icons meant to them. He would have met them on the soft ground where it had rained down possibilities. The soft ground, not that hard and trampled ground of certainties. And he would have asked them to share the treasures of their experiences that had led them to build this monument. And he might have remembered his own journey into the uncertainties that invited possibilities he never would have imagined for himself. And he might have remembered how his certainties were changed and rearranged again and again over the course of his life. And he probably would have opened his ears instead of his mouth. And he might have opened his heart instead of his head. And he might have remembered that experiences are always more transformative than the best explanations ever will be. And he might have entered more deeply into exploring that nameless mystery in which we live and move and have our being. A mystery he sadly shrunk by squeezing it into a system. A mystery that he put in a box, and he called it the God who made the world, whose address he presumed to know, the God who doesn't live in stones and shrines. A God Paul arrogantly insisted on demystifying and defining and describing. He might have remembered that mystery isn't a puzzle to be solved. Mystery is an invitation to journey more deeply into the inescapable presence of sacredness, the sacredness of life. I wonder if he had it to do over. Would he have shared the questions that were shaping his search instead of the pillars that built his creed, his doctrine, his theology? Maybe religion becomes the root of violence because it so easily ceases to be a dance with mystery, and it becomes the place where flowers will never grow in the spring. That hard ground of the place where we think we are right. But spirituality isn't about being right. It isn't about certainty. A spiritual path is the soft, ethical ground in which we live and from which we live. In which we live and move and have our being. The soft ground in which we plant our love and our hope, our justice and our compassion. If we were to hold fast to love and hold everything else loosely, how different the future of Christianity would be from its history. Imagine the possibilities. If we understood our living tradition as a way of living the radical love that we saw and heard reflected in the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, and we didn't see it as a map of the world or a map for the world, how different our missionary enterprise would have been if we'd come deeply in touch with a love that says to each other, I'll show you my treasures if you'll show me yours. Robert Frost said that religion starts like poems do, with a lump in the throat. If we could keep a lump in our throat, we'd never cut the throat of another. If we could keep the lump in our throat, we'd never be able to force all those words out that become an inflicting of our experience on another. If we'd never swallow that lump in our throat, we would radically alter the path that we call the Christian tradition in the 21st century. If we'd hold that lump in our throat, we could stay on the soft ground of possibility, where flowers that we'd never imagine will grow in the spring. Certainty is seductive. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. But certainty is absurd. Why would we trade in our deadly certainties for a lump in the throat? What would it take for us to retire our explanations and engage our questions? And what would it take for us to trust our unknowing? To allow the unknown gods to guide us into a journey into mystery? To be seduced, not by certainties, but by spirit. Imagine the possibilities. I also want to just remind us how we can contribute financially to the work we do together. There is a box at the back which welcomes your cash and checks. You can always make a contribution online at our website. Those of you that contribute by pre-authorized remittances, that's a huge help for us in having a predictable stream of income each month, and we thank you for that. And for those of you who have and haven't yet had the opportunity to support us in purchasing grocery cards, each week in the foyer there's an opportunity to do that. And so we welcome your purchasing your groceries in this way, which helps us receive a certain portion back on each of the gift cards that are sold from those stores. So thank you for the ways you contribute and for the ways we do the work that we do together in this circle.
As we go from this place, let's be reminded that there's no one way to be in this world. That there's no one way to believe. That there's no one creed to clutch and to hold tightly. That there are ways to be the best person that you are, many ways. Many ways to love. Many ways to show compassion. Many ways to make this world the place that we all dream it will be. In that light we go, and with that light we go and make of it what we will, holding it softly, sharing it, and most of all, listening, hearing, and watching for the light of others. May we go together.